I felt so inspired by this conversation with Deborah Haddon this week. Not because we criticise schools, but because it challenges something much deeper. How we learn to see ourselves in the first place. This isn't about blame. It's about asking what happens when creativity and self-expression are nurtured, or rather slowly edited, out of us. With the SEND review, proposed schools and wellbeing reforms, and the wider political debates about inclusion and outcomes, we are all being forced to reconsider: are we building systems that help our children become themselves, or systems that teach them how to perform a version of what's expected of them? In this episode, Deborah shares her self-approach philosophy and the work of the Ethereal Learning Foundation, exploring how creativity and self-discovery can really reshape learning into something far more human. We talk about the shift towards home education and what's driving it, creativity as the foundation of inclusive learning, and autonomy and what it means to actually trust the learner. Because what I keep coming back to is this idea of the wilderness of creativity, that space where there are no fixed paths, no script, no guarantees. Just the courage to take the road less travelled and see what emerges when you stop performing and start creating from who you really are. If this conversation with Deborah resonates with you today, you can watch the full episode on our YouTube channel and listen to the episode on all your favourite podcast platforms. Remember to subscribe to our Substack newsletter and give us a follow on socials. Let's get to the episode. Okay. Ooh. So, the card that's come up for you is: today can be the beginning of anything you want.
Oh, wow.
How does that card resonate with you? I mean, obviously the start of our conversation was you had to move and shift. But today being the beginning of anything that you want, talk to me about how that resonates with you and your work.
It does. I'm noticing at the moment that I'm sitting with all the blocks and barriers, which is kind of what happens first. And then I sort of part the curtains, if you like, and there's the vision. So at the moment, what we're doing with the Learning Centre and the ELF Foundation, we're kind of at a pivotal point. So it's almost like we're just about to kind of leap off the edge of the cliff and fly, is my sense. So we've sort of steadily built it up to where it is now, which has been quite a step-by-step, very measured process in lots of ways, pretty much led by myself. But we're at a point where the team has expanded, we have more expertise, and it just feels like there's a lot of opportunities presenting themselves. There's a lot of doors opening. It's an exciting time. We're just about to move into a bigger venue, and it's exciting. So it kind of fits with where we are. Is what it feels like. And I think the only thing that would stop us from achieving that is me, really. So just something to be aware of, I think, in that.
And I can sense that you're in a place of like deep reflection as you start to sort of take this leap.
Yes, I do a lot of reflection, because I'm aware of I guess the kind of sabotage that I can bring to situations, particularly when it comes to expansion and growth and really being out there. It's not, historically, it wasn't something that came naturally to me. So I do a lot of reflection on, can I do it? What's going to stop me? How am I presenting in this? A lot of self-development work, really.
Well, thank you so much for being so honest about that, because I think we hide a lot of that, don't we? It's all about the end product. It's about, the glory of where you are at the end, but actually this is about understanding the process and the creativity within that. For our listeners, do you just want to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, so they've got some context to our conversation?
So I am the founder of the Ethereal Learning Foundation, is the long name, but we call it ELF for short because it's much easier to say. And we provide a learning provision and tuition for children who are home educated. So the learning provision is for 4 to 10-year-olds. And then we've just recently set up, we call them tuition groups, but they're kind of more focus groups for older children. Having been a primary teacher for 30 years, I left mainstream education, and it was always my dream to set up an alternative kind of learning provision. And I happened to come across home ed by chance. Somebody said to me, "What about the home ed community, Deb?" Wasn't on my radar at all. Never really thought about it. Set up a pilot in, where are we? 2024, we set up a pilot provision, and it's just kind of grown from there. And within having spent all that time in education, I started to really notice what I felt children needed and what sort of learning environment was the best for them to develop and thrive, really. And that's kind of what we've implemented with the self approach in the learning provision.
And we're going to talk about the self approach because it is an educational philosophy that you have developed, obviously with your vast years of experience in education and within the education system. Can you just tell our listeners why potentially so many parents and families are choosing to take their children out of school and focus on home ed? Because I've got a few friends who have decided to do that as well. What's your perspective on it?
So obviously, putting my own views on mainstream education aside, because I'm not averse to it. It works for some children. But from my experience and from talking to the families and creating the community that we've created, children just don't fit. And there's a whole range of different reasons why it doesn't work for them. So we've had children who have additional needs, who the system cannot accommodate what they really need. So it's like trying to fit them into a box that is no longer fit for purpose, really. We've got children who have experienced extreme anxiety about going to school. And again, I think a lot of it is about the expectation and the structure and it's the performance. They're expected to conform and perform and very much lose sight of who they are. So most of the parents that come to us, and the majority of our children have been to school. They've experienced the school system. And then they come to us because it just doesn't work for them. And they start to lose. Parents have said that that their children, as they knew them, have started to kind of disappear, having been in the education system. I guess it hasn't moved with society and what young people now need, is my opinion.
And I think that, what you said there about education, children having to perform, that really hit hard just now. this idea of conforming, parents noticing that their children have lost themselves or losing parts of their personality because they're having to perform. My little one's 5, he's in year 1, and I've talked about this before as well. He loves writing. He loves writing stories. He will sit for 40 minutes at our kitchen table writing stories, but he doesn't like writing in school. There's a barrier there. There's a block. And, I try and, explain to him that it's part and parcel of going to school. You're practicing your handwriting. But I think there's too many rules and
And a lot of
expectation.
a lot of it, I was thinking about this yesterday actually. I think a lot of it is about the outcome, like the kind of final piece. And for me, and very much what we implement and facilitate in the learning provision, for me, it's about the journey. It has to be about the journey. And this links to the creativity aspect. We can be creative if we have the freedom to explore our own journey. We have less opportunity for creativity if there's a defined outcome, like an expectation, because that then feeds into self-belief and self-confidence. And so it doesn't surprise me that, writing a story at the kitchen table is is works, but then school doesn't.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because this idea of outcome and our preconceived ideas of our creativity and our creative expression and how that should look and how valuable it is actually is entrenched with all of this expectation and that judgment and not feeling like it's good enough. And it's so wrong that we're expecting our children to kind of produce something when actually they should just be playing and exploring, like you said, and the self-discovery. What role does creativity have in your education philosophy then, in self? Could you tell the listeners a little bit about this? Because it sounds fascinating.
So really, it's it is about that. It's an exploration of self. Everything starts with who we are, and that includes our creative self. So for me, the self-exploration, the self-expression, the self-belief, everything about us finding what really ignites our fire, our passion, if you like. We very much believe in meeting children where they are. That's one of our strap lines, is meeting them where they are. And we take the time and we get to know them. We get to know what sparks them, what interests them. Because if that's our starting point, that's going to be the starting point to their creativity. And then it's about nurturing that journey, and encouraging the resilience and the self-belief. And we facilitate that journey of self, really. And you can see it. The other day, just as an example, the other day I was working with some of our older children, and they really thrive on problem solving. Set them a challenge and they will run with it. And so ELF, the way that we set it up, it's very much, we might provide starting points, but then the children kind of explore and discover and play, and find things out for themselves. And on this particular day, I asked this group of children to come and do this particular activity, which sometimes does happen. And straight away, it was so obvious that they just didn't want to do it. They weren't interested. You could almost feel the drop in motivation. They were distracted. They their whole energy, they were slumped up against the table. It was like real resistance. And I
Yeah.
realized that I was focused on the outcome. It was a particular project that we were doing, and I wanted a particular outcome for a purpose, a reason. And because I was focused on that, we lost everything else about that activity. It wasn't the usual, let's explore this together. Let's kind of see where it goes. Let's see what happens. Let's see what we find out. It was very much, okay, so I need you to do this. And oh wow, it was a real eye opener. The difference that perspective made. And in the end, I was just like, okay, forget that. This is our starting point. They were kind of creating a map of how to place things in the environment. It was like, this is our starting point. Over to you. And within 10 minutes, probably less actually, they were kind of then moving things around, and the critical thinking was back, the problem solving, the enjoyment, the curiosity, the focus. It was all there. And it was a real, learning for me, really, I guess. In that, that's how to block creativity and imagination and all of those things that we really value, is by putting that restriction on. There has to be a specific outcome. It was a real wow.
There's quite a few things in there that I want to pick up on. So, as an educator, you recognize that by coming at this activity with a fixed idea of what you wanted the children to explore or produce at the end of it, made you realize that actually you needed to change the dynamic of that, and you needed to come at it from a different point of view. But you had the autonomy to do that. And so often we have curriculum outcomes, we have assessment outcomes, we have a lesson plan that we need to stick to because that builds onto the next thing. So actually the way that it's set up in our education system is very rigid. You had the autonomy to change the direction of that, and because you had that autonomy, you then noticed that curiosity came back, that creativity, and it became child-led. And so often now I'm thinking, we pay lip service to this idea of, yes, we are a creative school. Yes, we embed the creativity within our curriculum. But actually it goes back to what you said before, was this idea of performing and trying to make children fit into boxes. Because the adults in the room need to achieve something because they are assessed and they are held accountable to something, to that outcome. That's what's kind of resonating with me.
And I mean, there are restrictions because schools have to be seen to be achieving, there's a certain level of data, all of those outcomes are measured, there's accountability within that for the global perspective, actually. And we don't have to conform to that. We do have a lot of freedom, and we have a lot of freedom to follow children's interests because we don't have those restrictions. It was interesting, somebody who came to kind of have they came for a visit, and they said
Yeah.
to me, but the children aren't learning. They're not learning
Mm.
anything. And it was like, wow, like play-based learning and exploration and self-discovery and all of those things, the challenge, the experimentation, all of those things, people don't perceive as learning. It has to be written or recorded in some way. And it was a real kind of it really made me consider how I'd been when I first set the learning provision up, because I brought a lot of that with me. Um, when I first set it up, there was that, oh, we have to do this and we have to do this, and the children have to do this, and the parents will be expecting this. And it took me probably 6 months to kind of unpick my education. I guess I don't want to use the word indoctrination because that feels a bit harsh, but the kind of way that I was expected to conform in mainstream education, I had to undo it, really, to offer what we now offer.
And I think, thinking about the guests that I've spoken to, so many of them have said, I was told I wasn't creative in school, or I was told not to explore that creative path because it wouldn't earn me any money, or because I wasn't very good at it, or because, for whatever reason, they were signposted away from that. And so the long-term impact of coming to a facility like yours, and I'm saying facility, but I'm not sure if that's the right word, but an education space like yours that you're creating and building actually means that as adults, those children are going to know themselves. They are going to be able to express themselves. They are going to be able to demonstrate that resilience, because change is inevitable. Like, we've got to be able to imagine our life and design our life and create opportunities for ourselves, especially given the way that the world is moving. Those jobs that we're preparing those children for are probably not going to exist in don't even know how long, 5-10 years maybe. How do you connect with your creativity? What do you like to do?
It's interesting. I was thinking about this, and what I realized, so I love to do things that, I separated the two, really. My creativity, I realized, is separated into two parts. So I have like my hobbies and my pastimes. So I like sewing, I like doing puzzles, I like journaling, I like coloring, I like gardening. But what I realized in that, it's so interesting, was all of those have a specific outcome. So my creativity and my hobbies and my kind of interest in that sense are all defined by the outcome. So I questioned whether I actually enjoyed doing them or whether it was just another tick box. I'm not too sure on that one. But my real creativity comes when I'm mind mapping something to do with ELF or the learning provision, or I'm considering something that to put in place for one of our young children, or it's to do with my work. And that's my real passion. And with that, I think that's where I really unleash that creative side of me. It is that.
Where does that come from? That drive to help and support others to find their potential?
I Originally, I would have said that it came from my mother, um, because that was kind of what I remember of her, was that sort of caring, always wanting to help people. And then another family member reflected back to me a couple of years ago and said, I think you do it, Deb, because of your educational journey. So as a young girl, I was painfully shy. I wouldn't speak to people. I didn't answer questions in class. I was probably very much missed in education. I certainly didn't thrive in the education system at all. I had a couple of teachers who really helped me, who really cared, who really nurtured me, who really got to know me and build relationships with me. And I think from that point, I then started to develop more self-belief and more self-confidence. So on reflection, I think it's a bit like kind of wanting to be the person that I needed at that time, I think is the easiest way to explain it, to make a difference to young people who, it's like seeing myself really and wanting them to believe in themselves and really find their pathway.
I think that's really beautiful. And what a gift you're bringing as well, to be the person that you needed as a child. And I can imagine you bring so much of that to each of your sessions. Do you deliver the teaching as well, or are you sort of more of a manager, or how do the sessions work? I mean, obviously we know in traditional settings, you've got the classroom set up, the teacher at the front, but how do the sessions work?
Really not like that. So I am the lead facilitator. So we do have other paid members of staff and we do have volunteers, but I'm very much kind of the driving force. At the moment, I'm the driving force. I'm not sure how I'll be able to step back, if at all, but it is very much myself, and then we have a couple of other paid facilitators. So the sessions are 5 hours a day, and I guess the easiest way to describe it is they're set up almost like a sort of early years setting, in that we have different areas. So the children come in and there is a creative area, there's a kind of quiet book area, there's lots of games, lots of puzzles, there's small construction, there's writing and colouring, and there's an outdoor area. So it's kind of set up like an early years setting in lots of ways. We do have a theme each week. So we might do, I don't know, recently we did a theme on bridges. So I will set up a sort of starting point activity in each of the areas for those children who need something as a starting point. But invariably what happens is I put a lot of energy into creating these starting point activities. The children will come in and there's always questions about the theme. So, how do we build bridges? Can you build the strongest bridge? Just kind of starting points, things for them to consider. And they'll pretty much run with it, and they'll do whatever they choose to do, really. Some of them just ignore the theme. They completely ignore the theme and do their own thing. And that's fine. The kind of underlying philosophy, I guess, is that they are doing something that promotes their self-development in whatever way that looks. So we're quite big on communication with others and building healthy friendships and conflict resolution, working as a team. And then we come together for lunch. So they bring a packed lunch, we come together for lunch, and that kind of creates that sense of community and togetherness.
Yeah.
And then after lunch really is probably the only focused time that we have, when we all come together and we either do a science experiment as a group, or we'll set a task where they work in pairs or a small group and they work as a team and they're set a problem to solve or a challenge. But yeah, it's pretty much a lot of the time it is led by them, and there is an expectation that they set up some of the spaces, they tidy away, they're very much involved in the whole creation of the environment of the space. So it's
like
not,
co-creation.
yes, yes. So we will ask them, does this work for you? What would you prefer? How would you like this to look? So one of the children was struggling with lunchtime because we sit in a square and we're kind of facing each other. And it just didn't work for them. They felt vulnerable. They felt seen. So we changed it and we put them in smaller groups on smaller tables. So yeah, it's just a community, but kind of in smaller pockets. So we find it out together. We just work together to establish something that works for everybody. So everybody feels like they belong and it's a safe place for them to come.
Belonging is such a big topic, isn't it, when you think about education, and community, society as a whole. And what things that were kind of coming in when you were talking there about how the sessions run, I heard very much so that you were empowering the children as agents of change, that they can that they can make decisions, that they are part of their, they're leading their educational experience. And I think for those people who are listening and kind of probably screaming at us from wherever they're listening to this podcast, but what are they, going back to that thing, what are they learning? How are you assessing, their progress? How are they going to sort of progress from this into sort of secondary education and then meeting the expectations of that next part of their education? What would you say to them?
So the children that come to ELF, it's something that we've had a big focus on this in the last 6 months. Kind of I know that what we do works. I can see the change in the young people, as can their parents. But I have been asked that same thing quite a few times in the last 6 months. And my response is the children learn, they learn how they learn. So they know how that they develop the skills that they need to learn something new. So they recognize what they need to get that knowledge or to get that information or to learn something new. And that's priceless because that means that they can learn in any given situation. And also that sense of self. So they develop resilience, they develop self-belief. So all of those blocks to learning, those potential barriers to learning, we gradually break them down. And they don't spend hours filling in worksheets of numbers and writing endless responses in writing books. They do have writing books, but it's very much their choice about whether they complete something in there or not. But they do still use those skills. So they will still write things. They do use numbers, but they use them in a range of different contexts. So they can apply those skills to a variety of different contexts. So if they can do that, if they are then asked to do it in a different situation, these children are more likely to succeed than those children who've been given it in a certain way. And also our children are encouraged to fail and not encouraged to fail. I don't mean it in the sense that we set them up to fail. They're encouraged to make those mistakes so that they can feel what it feels like to make a mistake and come through the other side, rather than, let's not make a mistake, or that's wrong, or they don't get those messages in the same way.
So there's not a fear of failure. Actually, we're learning to embrace failure not as a learning opportunity rather than something to kind of shame the child. Yeah. What's your hope for the self approach?
I would really like it to be more widely used in educational settings. I'm not suggesting that I could, completely change the entire education system in the UK.
Why not?
Certainly not on my own. But I would like to see it implemented, and there are pockets of it implemented in different places. That's evident, but I would like to see it more widely embedded in schools and the education system, and to some extent in businesses and the more corporate sector. So just a small dream, really.
Just a small dream. But listen, this is a platform for dreamers. And I think it's, we've got to manifest these things. Because there will be people out there that are listening to this thinking, I need to get hold of Deb. This was when I read your article, I reached out immediately because you will be speaking to a lot of the listeners who share these values and frustrations, actually. So I will make sure that I put your contact details in the show notes. People can find you and start having those conversations with you, because there is a need for this. I mean, as you said, parents that you're in contact with and working with are noticing a difference. What sorts of things have they shared with you about their children that they're noticing?
So a lot of them, it's about the kind of that they have got their child back. So they're happy, they're more willing to explore different things. They are using some of the self-reflection, some of the conflict resolution, some of the signs of having built some resilience. They can see those in different situations. One of the mums, we had one of the young children who came to us, and she had completely lost her confidence and sense of self. And we were quite flexible in introducing her. So mum stayed for a while to build up the time where her daughter was left on her own. And mum was quite concerned about her daughter. And last Christmas, mum shared, so this young girl had been with us for about a year, and at Christmas mum shared that she'd actually stood up in front of friends and family and she had done a little performance, and mum was almost in tears. She was like, I never thought that we would get to that point where she would be able to do that. And it's those things that, well, mum and I both cried because it's so just life-changing. And there's a lot of, I mean, I could spend, the next hour talking about lots of little examples like that. And I think they're the things that a lot of the time we miss because we're so focused on the academic. It's like, oh, you've got a certificate for, knowing your, I don't know, the first 14 letters of the alphabet or writing a brilliant essay, but you don't get the certificate for finally being able to stand up in front of family and friends and do something. Yeah.
It is life-changing. The impact that you're making is huge, and I guess it's almost like we need case studies, isn't it? Of, the children who are coming to you and then track them for a certain amount of years and seeing where they go on and what they do with their life and how that changes, their community. And, we almost need like some research into it.
And interestingly, that is because we do have case studies of while they're with us. But it is one of the things that we're really looking at the moment is how do we do well-being. We have well-being kind of a measuring scale, and we have reflection journals. But it is something that we're looking at and in some ways I have some resistance to it because it's proving impact. So it feels a bit like accountability and data and outcomes. But I think without it, we don't have the evidence that proves that what we do really does make a difference.
Unfortunately, we live in a world where policymakers, people who, fund programs, governing bodies, they need evidence. That's what they rely on. So although there is some resistance, and I completely understand why, actually, it's kind of like a necessary evil.
Yes, it is.
It's been amazing to talk to you. I feel hopeful, actually. That's what I'm feeling. And I'm so glad that you responded to my email and you agreed to meet me in the wilderness because, this is what this is about. It's about celebrating and championing creativity and creative ways of supporting people out there, the long-term impact of working creatively.
It's interesting. I just share my response. So when I first got and it was the same with being on the radio. When I first got your email, I was like, can't do that. I can't do that. And then I always bring it back to, okay, so if it was one of the children at the learning provision, Deb, what message would you give to them? And then it was easy. It was like, I'm the role model for those children. I have to walk my talk. I can't be saying one thing to them and then be like, oh no, I'm not doing that. So then it was easy.
I'm glad it was an easy yes.